Welcome to Property Quorum. As usual, joined by the stalwarts of Property Quorum, of course, Hamish McClay, our esteemed Lord and Master, Juliet Babunal of Gunner Cook LLP, Silas J. Lees of Wigwam, of course, Chris Gilston of Root Home, and bringing up the rear by no means last, Dave Simonson of Devbrock. Now, as usual, we toss around terms, ideas, and concepts to do with the property market, and today is no exception. Today's title is The State of the Building Industry. Is it rhetoric or reality? And as is traditional, I throw Hamish mercilessly under the bus.
I don't know whether it's the time of year or not, but there do seem to be some strange happenings. And of course, it does bring to light why we actually call this our quorum, our property quorum. We've got some experts from different areas within the sort of property industry, all very experienced. And I'm sure each one of them can actually sort of bring to light what there is at the moment, what's going on in the industry generally that is actually rather slowing things down. It's not just one item. We have so many different items. I did notice there was one announcement this morning, which at least has given a little bit of hope, that Keir Starmer himself has actually got into speaking about things, and he's putting some money in to actually try and create some kind of element of push through on the hold up that we've actually got as a consequence of Building Safety Act, because certain gateways that planning consent needs to go through relative to sort of particularly sort of high-rise flats, and there's a lot of hold up, and apparently he's putting in more money to try and speed up that particular process. But there are so many other areas, and I am actually absolutely confident that each person that's speaking today can come up with something that they feel would help alleviate the situation that's going on.
Juliet, I'm afraid I'm going to toss the ball over to you. What weirdness is afoot?
Well, there's so many things. I mean, it's my job to sort of look at the weirdness and advise on risk. And so I look at my reality is always the consequences of what I advise you to do. So it can go either which way. So if we're looking at rhetoric or reality, it's always a reality that your action has a consequence. Just going on to what Hamish said, I'm not so sure if putting in more money is the only thing. One of the sort of issues that we've had throughout was that the people making the decisions aren't aware, or they haven't got the knowledge to make those decisions. So we're looking at, the planning delays, etc., or just setting legislation, and you're not really geared up to do that. And that's one of the key problems. Making decisions and not being fully aware, or not having the skill set to make those decisions. So for me, unless that changes, then the output or the outcome is going to remain the same.
Chris, let me toss you straight into the fray. Is there craziness afoot? Is it pure rhetoric, or is there actual going to be some positive movement, in your opinion?
I hope so. I think that there's the opportunity for there to be positive movement. Just to echo what Juliet said, there does seem to be a disconnect between the people that are theoretically in power and pulling these strings, and the grassroots where the action actually happens. And in my world, there's lots of small scale developers who want to get in on the action and want to be able to deliver on different projects. There's just a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty at this point in time. So we've had a strange week over at Root Home with a couple of clients pulling out of different transactions because of uncertainty, and they're just a little unsure on which direction things are going at this point in time. But that doesn't really dampen the appetite of other investors who are keen to step in and help deliver the type of projects certainly that we focus on. So yeah, there is a level of don't know what's going on that seems to be emanating certainly out of Whitehall at this point in time, and it is having an impact on people, in my view.
Silas, should we be taken to A&E, or is it A&U, ambiguity and uncertainty?
Great way of putting it there, Gareth. I think just echoing on what Juliet said, a lot of the problems that we're experiencing either with the home buying and selling process or building more houses could be solved if you probably got 10 to 12 of true real experts, people who are on the ground dealing with the consequences and dealing with the face-to-face day-to-day issues. Put them all in a room and actually thrash out what the actual solution to these problems is going to be. And I think decisions are being made in this disconnected environment where, throw money at it, that'll solve the problem. Well, who's implementing the systems or processes where that money's being funneled into? If they're frankly incompetent, or they've never run a building site, or they've never stepped foot on a building site, what chance have we really got? So I think that that disconnect from real experience is probably at the root cause of a lot of these problems that we're experiencing today.
Dave, apparently if you throw a certain number of monkeys in a room, you get the complete works of Shakespeare. How many government officials do we need to put in the same room to get a logical decision?
Well, I think it would make sense to add a number of intelligent people that make things happen in the private sector into the government, to be honest.
Ooh, burn.
The reality is that the lack of understanding at government level in all the main departments is not what the private sector is experiencing. There's a number of hold-ups in many different areas, which creates uncertainty. And a lot of what's been talked about at government level in terms of numbers, a lot of it is complete rubbish. If they're still under the illusion that we can build 1.5 million houses, then they're living certainly in a different world. So
no, I think that figure was over the next millennium.
Well, yeah, exactly. But ultimately, it comes down to getting quality people that actually know what is going on to make sensible decisions and take accountability. And there needs to be far a bigger connect between the private sector and public sector. And if that was to happen, I would feel incredibly encouraged. However, we're in a situation where there is a massive disconnect at the moment.
Wow. Hamish, it just seems to me that everyone seems to know that if we get the people in the room and make some sane decisions, we'll have forward movement. There seems to be a reticence on getting the right people in the room.
Well, it does seem a strange one. I mean, one of the comments that was made earlier this week, if LinkedIn's anything to go by, was a comment which was suggesting that if we got the AML right and there was something or other else right, it would sort of solve so much and save so much time. But we've got to have the houses there for any of this to actually sort of operate in any event. And when we actually put them, we've got other things which don't exactly help. I mean, from Dave's perspective, I don't know how he does it to get that money sort of involved. And the same with Chris, to actually attract that money in. When we've got somebody like Nationwide starting to put sort of a nice little things in, there are one or two sort of bolt holes and you can get things through and get them moving quicker. And people like Nationwide, who are a big influencer in lending side of things, they've actually sort of put a couple more things in there now to make it all the more difficult to actually sort of get over the ground to actually get that mortgage through. And it's one of those things, particularly in the residential sector, and I'm sure it's similar on the commercial sector, the big challenge is getting that money offer for the mortgage for many of the people. And I think that's a sort of hold up. But like it is, those people are not involved with the discussions at this particular moment in time. The big boy, it seems to be that the data providers are the ones who are creating the loudest noise, and they're the ones that are being listened to, rather than, as David's just sort of intimated, getting some of those experts there to actually speak about things.
Well, that's amazing. But I would worry, Juliet, that we don't necessarily have the right caliber of people looking at the problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% correct. The problem is there's so much fluff. And I often think, look, if I have a client and I explain process to that client shouldn't leave my office with a lack of understanding of the entire process. And that's often what happens. So you have a lot of debate or a lot of wasted time on legislation, for example, cladding, why isn't it clearer? Why hasn't the government and the legislation and the lawmakers made it clearer for people to understand, look, this is the pathway, this is the process, these are the consequences, these are the fines, etc. There is always an open narrative. And I think that needs to stop, because there's, you're wasting money at that in terms of the dialogue on what it could or could not be, rather than just setting it out very, very clearly. The law doesn't need to be a difficult thing, and it shouldn't be a thing where a layperson looks at something that affects them and they don't understand based on a first reading because it's so confuffled and you've got draconian old school language, etc. That has to change, and there has to be a level of accountability. So there is a notion that money just solves everything, and absolutely money is necessary, but the reality is there needs to be an amalgamation of these professionals who are fully aware of the way things work on the ground. What Dave sees in terms of the practical elements of requirements when it comes to funding a development loan, that the decision maker doesn't necessarily see the nitty-gritties of that, and so they may not be fit for purpose in terms of making those decisions. You've got to get someone who's been on the ground, who's exposed to it all, involved in the process for there to be change.
Thank you. Silas, it just seems to me that if we don't have the right people banging the drum, then nobody hears the drum being banged.
Well, there's a context that was forming in my mind as Juliet was talking there, and in relation to what everybody said here today, is the difference between the people here that are running their own business, that are living and dying by the sword, and are responsible and accountable for the decisions that they make in their day-to-day business, and that is a very different mindset to somebody who is in a public position, who can pretty much say whatever they want. Say they're going to throw money at something, or say they're going to build 1.5 million houses over the next 4.5 years, but there is no accountability or responsibility for those words that are being said, and there's no leadership to get there. And invariably, those people end up getting promoted or moved into different positions, rather than facing the sword of Dioclemes, I think the phrase is, where they would be axed from that position because they didn't deliver on what they said that they were going to deliver. And that's my biggest headache or problem with the public sector versus what we've got going on in the private sector, where we're all accountable, we're all responsible. If we mess it up, it's our heads on the chopping block, and that's a very good incentive to get it right.
Chris, as today's representative of the private sector, do you agree?
100% with Silas. He's absolutely correct. I think the electorate seems to have allowed itself to be completely misled with the dog and pony show that is the politics as we see it, that we see playing out on the telly every day. And it's nothing more than that. It's a show. And it remains to be seen what benefit we're actually getting from these people who we're allowing to pull the strings, and because their actions are completely out of alignment with their words. So yeah, this has turned into quite a political discussion. But
I don't know what you're.
I've mentioned the people pulling the strings, and it does come down to the difference between what they say and what they do. And at the moment, they haven't delivered on, or nothing has been delivered on what's been promised. Not even a scrap of an idea of how they're going to deliver on what they promised has been pushed into the public domain. So yeah, I'm a little puzzled about what benefit they're bringing. Certainly, and why we've even allowed ourselves to be deceived in this way for so long. But the situation as it is that there's huge regulatory complexities. There's huge planning complexities with the system. And there's not really a huge amount of joined up thinking, and that kind of combined with the rising costs, the inflation, it's just restricting the supply of housing further, and also that's going to have a knock-on effect in terms of a skills shortage that's going to come further down the line as the labour force starts to grow older, starts to retire. Then we don't replace those people because the jobs just aren't there. So it's a further time bomb that's going to keep getting worse, I'm afraid to say.
Wow. Dave, from your perspective, does it appear to be all soft soap, that we keep getting told that things are going to change, that we wait 14 years for a change in leadership, and when it does, it feels like it's the same again, but slightly lighter.
Yeah, I think definitely, and going back to what Silas said, I completely agree. I think there's too many people that hide in not making decisions, not accountable for what they're doing. And the processes that we all have to follow, I think in probably every single business now, is incredibly complex. It's become over compliant, over regulated. And if I go back just to what I do now, from a funding point of view, it was far easier 20 years ago when you had paper applications and followed the process you did then than it is now. And it's not just a subtle difference, it's enormous difference. It's challenging to get through any funding process now, and you've really got to know what you're doing. So I think, you know, everything has become overcomplicated. It needs to be simplified. We need to have the right people in the right positions. They need to be accountable, and they need to be talking with the people in the private sector that generally are working ridiculous hours to keep a roof over their head and food on the table, whilst the others are sitting there with their cups of tea and glass of champagne, making silly decisions, or not.
Hamish, if we recall, when we were yesterday talking in Ipsy Kind of Magic, shameless plug, every Wednesday, we were talking about the fact that pre-digitization, all the land registry stuff, you could actually make things go pretty damn quickly. And nowadays, supposedly post-digitization, it seems that it can be taking any time from 5 days to 5 weeks.
Well, I think what has happened, I think everybody's spoken, has said very much the similar type. There are an awful lot of things which are slowing the process down, and those aren't being moved out of the way. We do need experts. We do need planning experts. We do need building inspectors. We do need quality property lawyers. Now, all of these people need to be trained up because there's a shortage of all of them. And as Dave intimated as well, there's a shortage of people who can actually do the building. So the intent, the sad thing is, and we saw this right from the very, very start with this government, the intent has always been there. They've got the sense of direction right, but unfortunately, they're just going down all these cul-de-sacs at the moment, rather than actually sort of sticking to the main roads. And you've got to get that highway right. You've got to get the motorway right. Once you've got that right, we can actually pull in the experts. We can encourage people. There's not a lot of people being encouraged to actually sort of get involved. And I think whilst this is happening, we're going to be more reliant on the type of work, particularly that Chris is doing, because it's going to be that small, medium-sized sort of investor that's going to be moving things and can move things along. Because the big, where is the confidence for anybody that's got a major development? Where is the confidence for them to move at the moment? The intent's right. Let's just sort of try and get the roadway right to actually get us to that particular sort of direction.
Well, if we haven't got light at the end of the tunnel, at least we're talking about building the right roadway to get there. And on that building note, I'd like to thank every one of our attendees today. Of course, Hamish McClay of Such Convey, Chris Gilson of Root Home, Juliet Babula of Gunner Cook, Silas J. Lees of Wiggy Wham, and Dave Simonson of Dev Brock. And thank you all for taking the time out to spend it with us today. We are here every week, tossing up all those parts that we all like to think we know about, but no one really brings to the surface. And I hope that all of you find that this is useful and that you can find something in there to perhaps spur you on to the next great level. But until next time, please keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars and try and look after your mental health. Bye-bye now.